Coming up on Arirang News, the South Korean government starts taking applications for the fourth round of pandemic relief funds for small business. For those hardest hit, thousands of dollars each are going out starting today. Reports say the huge cargo ship stuck in the Suez Canal is now mostly afloat, lifted by the tide. Hundreds of ships are waiting to get through the canal, but it could still be some time before the Ever Given is out of the way. And President Moon Jae-in calls for the government to get to the bottom of the real estate speculation scandal and root out corruption in the property market. He wants a new agency to monitor the market for unfair transactions. It's 5 p.m. here in Seoul. Thanks for tuning in to Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. South Korea has confirmed another 384 new cases of COVID-19, a decline from recent days, but still near the average over the past few months. New measures have taken effect today, including a ban on eating food in certain public places like cinemas and PC rooms. And to get into bars will require the scanning of a QR code for each guest, rather than just one for the group. Choi Jung-yoon reports.
No more popcorns in movie theaters, nor a simple cup of coffee in the library. One should now avoid eating in public places in South Korea or face a possible fine, as the government has adopted a new set of prevention measures. It applies to 21 places, including sports arenas, museums, private cram schools, PC rooms, and saunas. Previously, eating inside was allowed under social distancing levels 2 and 1.5. While the current systems will remain the same for another 2 weeks, the revised rule bans eating regardless of the level. However, there are exceptions. For instance, if a museum or other facility has a designated area for eating, like a cafe or restaurant, or when private partitions are installed in PC rooms to keep people apart. After a 1-week grace period, violators will be fined 100,000 won or around $90. On top of the no-eating policy, entry to entertainment facilities like pubs, bars, and nightclubs will require an individual digital QR log. Submitting an individual phone number and address were mandatory, meaning that conventionally one person in the group could representatively provide the information. Now, each person in the group must write or submit a QR code to enter. Additionally, more thorough temperature checks will be conducted to restrict people with COVID-19 symptoms from entering, while there will be a person in charge of making sure the rules are enforced. To try and stem the spread, health authorities have extended until April 11th the Level 2 social distancing in the Seoul metropolitan area and Level 1.5 in the rest of the country. That means the ban on private gatherings of 5 or more people remains in place, with certain exceptions only, like pre-wedding gatherings of the bride and groom's families, which can include up to 8 people. Choi Jung-yoon, Arirang News.
The South Korean government has started taking applications for pandemic relief payments for small business owners. Some 3 million people are eligible for payments, ranging from around $1,000 to $4,500 for the businesses hit hardest. The money is being deposited already for those who applied this morning. Paeunji reports.
Small business owners who have been hit hard by the COVID-19 pandemic have started to apply for the fourth round of emergency relief funds. Starting 6 a.m. on Monday, text messages were sent to all candidates. The government has set aside nearly $6 billion to provide support for a total of 3.85 million people. On Monday, applications opened online for those whose company registration number ends with an odd number. Those with an even number will be able to apply on Tuesday, and starting Wednesday, all candidates will be able to sign up online for the relief funds. For those who apply before 6 p.m., the funds will be handed out on the same day. Around $4,400 will be given to small businesses that were banned from opening for 6 weeks or longer. This includes indoor sports facilities and singing rooms. Those that were banned from opening for less than 6 weeks, such as private educational institutes, will be able to receive around $3,500. And roughly $2,600 will be handed out to small businesses with limited operations, including restaurants, coffee shops, and PC rooms. Small businesses who saw a more than 60% sales drop, including those in the travel industry, will be given about $2,600. Businesses that experienced a more than 40% drop in sales will receive $2,200. About $1,760 will be handed out to small business owners who had a 20 to 40% fall in sales. And others who saw a drop in sales will be given around $880. Nearly $400 million has also been set aside for freelancers and contract workers. They will be able to apply for the fund starting Tuesday. 배은지, Arirang News.
The massive container ship blocking the Suez Canal for nearly a week now has been mostly refloated, raising hopes that it will soon be moved out of the way. That's according to the Suez Canal Authority. Crews have been working day and night to dig it out and were helped Sunday night by a rising tide. The ship tracking service Vessel Finder has changed the status of the Ever Given to underway. The Ever Given has been jammed sideways across the canal since last Tuesday, each day since then blocking an estimated $10 billion in trade. Now our business correspondent Seoul has a look ahead at some economic news coming up this week. The U.S. will have data on consumer confidence and employment, and South Korea will have numbers on industrial production and consumer inflation.
On Tuesday, the Conference Board will publish the U.S. Consumer Confidence Index for March. The monthly updated figure was 91.3 in February, which is nearly 2.5 higher compared to a month before. The index reflects how optimistic Americans are about their economy and ability to find jobs. The number is compared to the benchmark year of 1985, when the index stood at exactly 100. An index higher than 100 indicates that consumers are more confident than they were in 1985. On Wednesday, the Ministry of Economy and Finance will announce the industrial output for February this year. In January, Korea's overall industrial output declined compared to the previous month for the first time in 8 months. The figure went down 0.6%, mainly due to decreased output in the mining and manufacturing sectors. Industrial output is one of the 3 major indicators which shows the macroeconomic status of a nation. The other 2 include Consumer Price Index and employment rate. On Friday, the Ministry of Economy and Finance is set to release the Consumer Price Index for March. Last month, the index saw the biggest rise in a year, increasing 1.1% compared to the same month in 2020. The rise was mainly caused by a price increase in agricultural and fishery products, which marks the sharpest rise in 10 years. On Friday, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics will release the unemployment rate for March. The national rate stood at 6.2% in February, down 0.1 percentage point from a month before. However, the February figure was still higher than the one from the same time in the previous year, which was 3.5%. 서은경, Arirang News.
Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Dr. Yang Jun-seok, Professor of Economics at the Catholic University of Korea. Professor Yang, good to have you back on.
Happy to be here.
Well, tensions are rising again between the U.S. and China. Many issues, of course, but each of them criticizing the treatment of minorities in the other's country. The Biden administration's decided to leave in place the tariffs put on China by President Trump. What explains that decision, and what do you make of it?
Okay, well, no one really expected the Biden administration to cut tariffs on Chinese goods in the near future. And that's because the political position that Biden and his Democratic Party is in right now. Even though during the presidential election, Biden won the popular vote by 7 million votes. In terms of number of states and electoral college votes, the election was much closer. And if you look at the Congress, especially the Senate, then there's virtually no lead. So President Biden really has to keep his current coalition together. Now, if Biden removes China tariffs or even engage in free trade activities like signing additional FTAs, Biden may lose progressive Democrats, moderate Republicans, China hawks, and labor unions, especially in the U.S. Midwest manufacturing belt. So Biden cannot really afford to lose any member of his coalition, and if he engages in free trade, he's going to lose at least some of those coalition members. So trade policy is really taking a back seat. Since the beginning of the Biden administration, Biden administration has only really carried out two relatively major trade policy decisions. The first is withdrawing support for Yoon Myung-hee for WTO Secretary General, so Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala can become Secretary General of the WTO, and then mutually withdrawing tariffs imposed between U.S. and EU, the tariffs which were imposed because of subsidies for civilian aircraft production. Other than those two decisions, President Biden is really keeping quiet on trade policy, and this decision on retaining Chinese tariffs is part of that. Also, President Biden is using China as leverage for his domestic economics and human rights policies. When President Biden had a press conference last week where he said that China is not going to become the leading country in the world, the latter part of that sentence included the phrase that it's because the United States is going to continue to grow and expand. So President Biden wants to use China as a leverage to get his infrastructure investment plan, education plan, R&D plan passed through Congress and get accepted by the American people. So China is much more useful as leverage for domestic policy right now, as well as strengthening the human rights policy of the United States, which President Trump ignored, and strengthening the coalition between U.S. and European and Asian countries, which were also damaged by the Trump administration. So for now, at least, President Biden is using China as a tool. I think, at least from his point of view, it's much more China is much more useful as a tool to get his domestic policies across.
Well, China issues have been weighing somewhat on the markets lately, but on Friday, Wall Street, all three main indices saw a big gain. The S&P up more than 1.5%, the Nasdaq 1.25%. What's the story in the global markets right now, and what do you see in the days ahead?
Okay, well, the S&P actually hit a record high on Friday, and the reason is that the U.S. has a lot of optimistic factors right now. The vaccination is going faster than what anybody expected just a few months ago, and then the Financial Reserve announced that banks could resume buybacks and raise dividends starting at the end of June. So that's another indication that the U.S. economy is going back to normal, and Fed is going to let the financial institutions to try to make more money again. Also, the inflation fears have fallen somewhat because the personal consumption expenditure inflation, the Fed's preferred price index, rose less than expected. So the inflation fears have calmed down a little bit. 10-year Treasury bond yields fell from a high of 1.74% to 1.63% on Thursday, even though it rose slightly back to 1.67% on Friday. Consumer sentiment index is also up higher than expected. So those optimistic factors did hit the U.S. stock markets, but I think there's going to be some profit taking early this week because over the weekend the U.S. Stock futures were down, and also the stock investors are waiting for jobs report on Friday and details on Biden's infrastructure plan. So I think for this week at least, we're going to see a bit of a fall in the beginning, and then wait and see attitude. Europe and Asian stocks are more or less taking cue from the United States. Both stocks in both areas rose at the end of last week, but the Asian stocks are mostly down today.
And you mentioned that Wall Street futures are lower right now, looking at a lower opening on Monday. Korean stocks closed a little lower today. Tell us about the local market.
Okay, well, Kospi is down today for the first time in 3 trading days. It tried to rally in the mid-afternoon, but failed. So it really fell during the end of the trading day, last few hours of the trading day. Institutions sold 712 trillion won's worth of stock. And basically, the lackluster market right now seems to reflect overall uncertainty on where the market is going to go because people are now very nervous that perhaps the markets are too high. Kospi was down 0.16% today, ending at 3,036.04. Kosdaq, similar story. It rallied for most of the day, but it lost force at the end of the day, so it lost for the day overall. It fell 0.27%. It ended today at 954.10.
All right, Professor, we'll have to leave it there for today. Thank you, as always, for sharing your insights with us.
Thank you.
South Korean President Moon Jae-in has called for investigators and administrative agencies to use all their available resources to root out corruption in real estate as public anger grows over alleged illegal land speculation by public officials. Earlier in the day, he also replaced his chief of staff for policy over a property-related controversy. Kim Min-ji reports.
President Moon Jae-in has stressed the need to get to the bottom of illegal speculation by public officials regardless of their positions or political interests. At a session Monday of the Anti-Corruption Policy Consultative Council, Moon called for all administrative investigative powers to be deployed to seek a solution to what he called the structural and fundamental problem of real estate corruption. He was joined by top officials from related ministries and other government agencies.
하다 보면 조사와 수사 대상이 넓어질 수도 있습니다. 멈추지 말고 정치적 유불리도 따지지 말고 끝까지 파헤쳐 주기 바랍니다. 드러난 범법 행위에 대해서는 단호히 처벌하고 부당 이익을 철저하게 환수해야 할 것입니다. 차명 거래와 탈세, 불법 자금, 투기와 결합된 부당 금융 대출까지 끝까지 추적해 주기 바랍니다.
A probe is underway into allegations that officials at the State Housing Corporation LH used insider information to buy land before they were announced as part of major development projects. The investigation has been expanded to officials at other relevant state agencies, the Land Ministry, and the Presidential Office. Citing people's anger over the situation, Moon called for parliamentary cooperation in passing new legislation, including a bill to prevent conflicts of interest among public officials. He also called for a system that would require all civil servants to register their assets and would monitor any changes, and for the government to swiftly set up a new body to watch for unfair real estate transactions.
부동산 불공정 거래 행위와 시장 교란 행위를 금지하고 상설적 감시 기구로 부동산 거래 분석원을 설치하겠습니다. 투기 목적의 토지 거래로 수익을 기대할 수 없도록 하고 농지 취득 심사도 대폭 강화하겠습니다.
Separately on Monday, President Moon replaced his policy chief, Kim Sang-jo, following reports that he had signed a contract to hike the deposit on an apartment he is renting out by 14% just days before a new law limited the increase to 5%. The top office said that Kim had offered to resign, and the Moon's decision reflects the seriousness of the real estate situation. Moon promoted to the post as Senior Secretary for Economic Affairs, Lee Ho-seung. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
South Korea today is seeing high levels of yellow dust blown over from a sandstorm in China. Because of the poor air quality, the authorities have issued a warning in the greater Seoul area for the first time in 6 years. Kim Yeon-sung reports.
An unusually heavy layer of yellow dust from China cloaked South Korea on Monday. Seoul had dangerously high concentrations, which peaked at 783 micrograms per cubic meter. Gunsan in Jeollabuk-do province and the southwestern city of Gwangju saw a density of over 1,000 micrograms per cubic meter. In response, authorities on Monday issued yellow dust warnings in at least 10 cities in South Korea, including in the capital Seoul, for the first time in 6 years.
As you can see behind me, Seoul's skyline is obscured by a heavy cloud of yellow dust. Staying outdoors for a prolonged period of time today can lead to the irritation of the eyes and the throat. The thick air has people concerned.
I am really worried. Even if I'm wearing a mask, there's no guarantee that the dust wouldn't seep through. I can feel my eyes itch. I don't feel any other symptoms, but I can definitely feel my eyes itch.
I'm a little worried, but I prepare myself well. I wear my mask tightly and I'm drinking water regularly. If it gets worse, I'm going to wear sunglasses.
Fine and ultrafine dust, which are toxic dust caused by industrial activities, also reached hazardous levels.
Yellow dust particles will mix with the other particles, which will continue to linger in the air, causing the density to increase throughout tonight. But the density will fade as tomorrow comes.
Experts say high levels of dust can cause severe infections to the respiratory system, potentially increasing the risk of COVID-19 infection.
The yellow dust will damage your respiratory system's ability to defend itself. It will hurt the ciliated cells that make up the respiratory tract's defense ability and make it easier for many other pathogens like the coronavirus to enter.
But experts say that this won't be the last yellow dust of the spring season. Kim Hyun-sung, Arirang News.
The defense chiefs of 12 countries, including South Korea, the U.S., and the UK, have condemned the violence in Myanmar after the bloodiest day since the coup last month. Troops in Myanmar fired on protesters again on Sunday, killing about a dozen people. Min Soo-kyun reports.
Protesters again took to the streets on Sunday to demonstrate against Myanmar's military in Yangon and other cities across the country. Footage showed people filling the streets to protest against the military coup that overthrew the country's elected government and seized power on February 1st. Residents told the local media that the military had been firing on protesters again, killing about a dozen more people on Sunday, just a day after they had murdered at least 114 civilians. The latest victims include a 20-year-old nurse who was shot in the head as she attended to those injured by the military. Witnesses also said security forces on Sunday opened fire on a crowd at a funeral for a 20-year-old student who was killed the previous day. On the same day, funerals were also held elsewhere, including one in Yangon for a 13-year-old boy who was shot dead on the bloodiest day. The mother of the victim mourned the loss of her little son. On Saturday, the day of the deadliest crackdown by the military, generals celebrated the annual Armed Forces Day. Images showed military officials walking along a red carpet smiling and others seated at large tables for dinner. The event drew an angry response from the international community. The United States, Britain, the European Union, and other countries are renewing their criticism of the military coup. The UN Special Rapporteur for Myanmar, Tom Andrews, also said it was time for the world to take action against atrocities in Myanmar. He urged the UN Security Council to draft a resolution on the situation and added the military there should be cut off from funding and access to weapons. So far, at least 459 people have been killed by security forces in Myanmar, according to the Assistance Association for Political Prisoners. Min Soo-kyun, Arirang News.
And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.